Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So on an occasion like this, it's the pulsa today, which is literally to do with the drawing close to that which is auspicious, associated with the lunar cycle. Time when in ancient India they didn't have clocks and calendars, they'd operate by the moon. Okay, full moon, new moon, and that would be a special day because that was the time when the seasons would change, when the whole cycle was changing, going from fullness to emptiness, from emptiness to fullness, from bright moon to dark moon to bright moon. That cycle. And something about that rhythm represents our own birth, death, represents our own breathing. From breathing in completely, fully, brightly, breathing out fully, completely, releasing. And within that is our life. And if we don't understand the fullness and the emptiness, we get stuck. We don't really let things go properly. You don't let things go completely. The system is stagnant. You don't rise up properly. So the full, you could say, the full inhalation of your life is to really come in fully, properly, brightly, with everything there, and then able to release it all. This is a cleansing, clarifying, purifying process. You understand nature, you understand the body, you understand where these phases, you understand an awareness that is present through all of that, beyond birth and death, you could say. This is an occasion. All of us are born and die. All of us breathe in and out. And all of us have some sense of faith, aspiration. Where's the meaning? Where's the purpose? What's really life about? What's my purpose in life? What's the resolution? What's necessary to really take in? What's necessary to let go of? How do we keep that not just once but ongoing? This is called cultivation. Bhavana. And you're really in your life. And it's essential, not getting lost in the details, not imagining you being something more than that. It's not something that seeks fixity, stability, to be constant. Actually, this leads to confusion, grasping, holding on, disappointment. Really tuning into the phases, the changes, the brightness, the darkness, the fullness, the emptiness, the birth, the death. And if that is fully comprehended, fully attended to, there's what is it that attends to that, is aware of that. And this is sort of wordless, ineffable. But it says it's just something that can inspire us, something beyond just this coming and going. And these occasions are about that. We've all come from our different details of different lives, different personalities, different ages, different conditions, and yet gathering together around that purpose. The day is especially significant. It's the going into homelessness, anagarika, of Fergus. And this was again something that people would do on these lunar days. There would be anagarikas for that day. They'd put aside their household duties, wear white, and practice the 8 precepts, celibacy, not eating in the evening, putting aside worldly duties and focusing on Dhamma. And the Buddha said this is the prime time to give teachings because people are really tuned in to that. Their faith is there, their purpose is there. They're not distracted, and you can help them. It's a prime time for teaching. And of course today is also a further commemoration of Lumpur Cha, Tanajan Cha, Lumpu Cha, different terms of reverence, for the founder of Cittaviveka, this place. This was the first place that was founded in his training practice, his training style, and his image, and his first one in the West. The only one he actually visited because there were no other ones. So this is quite amazing, really. It's coming together. Of course, Cittaviveka itself is pretty amazing. The way it all kind of came together out of just seemingly miracles and good luck and circumstances to create something that seems so established and so welcoming, and stands for the Dhamma. And it's part of it about what it's about. Part of it is about establishing a culture. And that's cultivation and culture, same sort of root words. Because with with culture, you immerse yourself in it. You move into it, and you activate in it. You engage with it, and you engage with it. It tends to steer how you engage, what's correct or what's appropriate, what's beautiful. And Dhamma culture, the aim of it is to immerse us in an environment that draws out the best and starves the worst and gets us to examine things clearly. This is cultivation. Although we tend to often use the word meditation, which is really one, it's a feature of it, which is really about stabilizing the mind. As we all recognize, that kind of process can only occur particular times of day, or maybe for brief periods of retreat. And even if it's a long retreat, it's still contained by your own attention. So often with meditation retreats, you're almost deliberately, closing down the environment, external world, and just trying to focus internally. And that's salutary and useful. But of course, for many people, the riddle, the conundrum arises: how can I keep this going when I open my eyes and start moving around and talking with people and doing things? It seems to all that nice, refined clarity and composure, it seems to have kind of gone. And that's the drawback of it. And so certainly with Lumpur Cha and the whole kind of forest tradition, the sense of that's part of what we do, but it's actually much bigger than that. It's much wider, because it's really opening, if you like, opening the practice to involve sense contact and behavior and engagement and responsibility and relationship, and suffusing it all with Dhamma, and using it to learn from, and using it to keep noticing how one's affected, where one gets reactive, beginning to look at some of our habits that we might have in terms of our relationships with people or positions or authority or lack of it or health or whatever, and how we get upset or saddened or attached or fearful around our life. And rather than carving out a kind of a little cave in the middle of it where we can hide away, actually the courage and the considerable endeavour it takes to come out of that into something whereby the eyes are open, things are happening, we're doing things, and yet we're truly looking at how we can cultivate salutary qualities, such as which there are lists of, And one of these, of course, is the 10 parami, which I think are very helpful to bear in mind. 10 parami, generosity, givingness, general giving heart, which is material. It's also hospitality, giving attention, giving advice, sila, morality, ethical sensitivity, awareness of one's conduct, speech, body language, mannerisms, ways of dress, that produce what effects they produce in oneself or others. Renunciation, looking towards turning away from the gratification triggering that sense contact, a very important one, which is really the pivot of the Anagarika, is really making a big thing on how sense contact, itself is just a fact of life. And the problem is not sense contact itself, it's what sense contact arouses, which we can have some say over. We're not blind, deaf, dumb, numb, but we don't have to be aroused by greed, passion, fear, hatred, and all these kinds of pollutions. And so really we're looking at, actually begin to examine how those occur, and both restraining by not giving attention to where one get overwhelmed or confused or drawn out, but even where we recognize those tendencies, then examining what's happening here, where does this go? And so this is where you really develop a lot of wisdom, which is another parami, discerning. Where does that go? Stressful, unstressful, leading to emptying out, leading to filling up, leading to clamouring for more, leading to demanding less, leading to all this passion and involvement, or cooling it. Where does this go? This is discernment. Khanti, patience, just the ability to put away the time boundaries. Another very, very significant feature of monastic training and Dhamma cultivation, to be with things we don't particularly enjoy. Not to necessarily enjoy them, but to recognize, if things are not pleasant, getting averse to it doubles the problem. It's like you're already shot by one arrow, then you shoot yourself with another arrow. You both feel the discomfort and then add aversion to it. The two are not necessarily linked. But that means you've got to have patience, because when one gets discomfortable, either physically, verbally, and of course psychologically, huge challenge, really. We get that, this isn't right, I don't see the point of that. What's she doing? He looks weird, this isn't right, I don't stand for that. You boil it down, what does it mean? Don't like it. Unpleasant. And then there's that, and, well, you want to follow that? Is it skillful? and maybe things are pieces. Just look for the aversion. And it takes real patience with oneself, with one's own emotional reflexes and habits. We don't really feel we have any control over it, just flares up. That's why this is really long term. So though, in the old days anagarika would be for one night, we recommend, look, let's do this for a year. And then you're going to get a feeling for the power of that. Because along with that patience, you've got to have honesty, to be honest to yourself, what's going on, and you have to have resolution. These are also two very powerful parami, and you have to have energy. It means, and you get more energy by determining, instead of using energy on proliferating, resisting, comparing, fighting, just energy on holding steady, bearing, holding steady, and investigating the agitations in the mind. And then we get the power of meditative training, which is you can begin to sense your body, and your awareness, and you feel these energies moving, these fears, these aversions, these struggles. You put all that passionate stuff within this bigger vehicle, this bigger vessel of just steady, spacious presence, and don't think about it. Just sense it. And let the power of that steady, patient presence kind of absorb and dissipate the flares of passion and struggle and opinionatedness. And this is where these, cultivations, this is to me is the real meditative bit in the cultivation. Oh, well, of course, that's its contribution, a very powerful contribution. So we look at these parami, generosity, morality, renunciation, wisdom, patience, energy, truthfulness, and resolution. Without resolution, the rest are just thoughts. So resolution is the thing that really makes it steady work. And then the others are kindness, or not picking up the thread of aversion. Not picking up the thread of cynicism, not picking up the hint of complaining and fighting oneself. Recognizing those tendencies and just instead turn the energy towards something more warm and nourishing. And finally we have equanimity, which is a sense of not picking up the excitement, that whisper, that shimmer, that glow, that tickle, that flare that excites. Excites us either success, failure, oh no, we get agitated. And through these holding this and holding these qualities, which when you get the idea and you go, wow, this takes some doing. Certainly does. It certainly does. But that's why we have this immersion in a culture to support that. Whereby you're getting the signals, you're getting the reminders, you're getting the conversations, you're getting the teaching, you're getting the routines, the lifestyle that constantly tend to break the rush of one's passions, and the slumping of indolence. Something steadying. So when I talk about this culture, then having travelled around and been to Dhamma centres and monasteries and various kinds over the years, it's for myself feeling very fortunate, to be within this particular collection of Dhamma centres. They have differences, changes, but there's something congruent, coherent about all of them. And they all advocate lifestyle, culture, and the culture is bounded with the precepts and earthing, groundedness, stability, responsibility, and community, and renunciation, of course. And rather, these just kind of these languages, but actually you're starting to live in something. You're getting it, not just an idea in your head. It's coming in through your sense organs, through the way you move, the way you see other people move, the voices you hear, the conversations you hear, the pauses, and particularly when you have very experienced, seasoned people who are deeply embedded, deeply embedded, have gone way beyond. Then you're picking up their example, noticing. And we're extremely fortunate to have still receive some of the echoes and the memories and the perceptions and the training of Lunar Observance, a founder in a way. Lunar Observance, a forest monk. So if you've been around the Buddhist world, you see many kinds of Buddhist contemplatives and monastics. Some are doing more the ceremonial duties or civic affairs, or studying. You know, the forest monks, who are the forest and nuns, who head out for remote places, forests, and to get really back to the earth, feeling that the complexities of civil society and the culture of civil society is a major distraction, and that one is greatly strengthened by living in a situation where you're not getting those influences. So though we might call, say Lunar Observance from Thailand, well, if you went to Bangkok, you wouldn't be like this. You go to Isan, which is northeast Thailand. Of course, this was now talking about 1940s and 1950s. Isan, northeast Thailand, was a pretty remote and what's the polite way for it? But earthy, unsophisticated in terms of civic society, a bit rough. But people were extremely resilient because they had to live and deal with earthy realities of birth and death and hunger and food and so forth, and club together, work together, village society working together. And that we say is the breeding ground of most of the great meditation teachers in Thailand came from this particular region. It was the breeding ground of cultivation, because it encourages deep resilience, a lot of energy, effort, and wisdom that's not theoretical, wisdom that's the savvy that you need in order to get around in a forest. You've got to keep your eyes open, you've got to be on your toes, you can't doze off, you can't wander off into your head. And it's also a place of extreme insecurity, which most people dread, naturally, but is the prime place for fully waking up. You could be dead tomorrow. There are snakes, there are wild places, there are spirits and evil creatures who could destroy you. And that was the ethos of that culture. So you really got to be aware, be wakeful, and look after each other. And that's the kind of grounding. And I think that a lot of that feeling and that flavour was present in the presence of Lumpur Cha and the places he established. It's still very earthy, practical, hands-on. Not a lot of theory. Not saying theory's wrong, not saying study's wrong by any means, but forest monks tend to be more emphatic around, using your body, really, and refining it. So it's not just it can be extremely refined body language, body deportment, earthy things like really keeping your kuti clean, your little hut, however simple and rustic it was, it's always swept very clean and clear. Both because that way you don't get kinds of invasive insects taking over, and it means you're aware of whether a snake's getting in. And it's a sense of responsibility. This is your place, then you attend to it, you relate to it. It's not just a place you kind of casually use. You're deeply aware. This is a shelter, then respond to that. Look after it. And these are the people you live with. This could be somebody else's kuti the next few months. It's a Sangha property, then please respond in that way. And so you come out, don't you? You can't just sort of sink in. You're encouraged to come out, but not in a way that's seeking gratification or fanciness, but actually is responsible and considering, this very property that's been created for me, I want to be able to pass that on to somebody else. And that's a simple, that's a kind of simple line in the training. And from that we step out of our solipsism, where we imagine we're kind of lost in our heads on our own and creating ideas and schemes of what we would like to be, or what we just come out. Come out of that rabbit hole, because it's not developing any parami. There's no, it's just drifting and proliferating. It's not helping you to discharge the agitations and confusions of the mind. In fact, it's adding to them. So we use a thing even like a lodging as a place to, what do you really need? How do you respond to it? How do you keep it so that somebody else can move in and it's in good working order? It's very much part of cultivation. It requires mindfulness, requires reflection, requires selflessness, and requires the understanding of impermanence. I could be gone tomorrow, and how about somebody else? This thing that's created is liable to decay. How do I respond to that? All these are aspects that Lumpur Cha would often teach and encourage in firm and resolute ways. How to look after the bowl, how to do the chores properly. That would be a major feature of teaching. What's this about nibbana? Spirituality, what are you thinking about? Where you carry your bowl or something? What's that got to do with anything? Because you're actually working on the here and now factors of where you're getting careless, where you're taking things for granted, where your attention is drifting off, and you keep holding it within this culture. So it starves it. By not putting energy into proliferations, you're just stabilizing it in a very simple, earthing way. I think many of us long for such a thing. We live in a culture that's increasingly become almost abstract. I met many people who are now listening to this will be looking at screens, and that has its advantages, certainly. But we also reflect on how much time do you spend looking at a screen, and what are the realities of Two-dimensional images flashing. You come across a website, amazing website, looks fantastic. Who's behind it? You don't know. You come across a message on a screen, carefully, who said that? You don't know. Is it true? You don't know. You come across something advertised, you can't taste it, you can't touch it, you can't experiment with it. You sure it's genuine? And all this kind of virtual realities that you can't actually really test for yourself, and they're disembodied. As we if we look at the screen, we lose contact with our own here and now presence, embodied presence, and we're into the world which has always been presented of, that which is advertising, glamorous, interesting, fascinating, new, powerful, exciting, so forth. Not about equanimity, that's for sure. You don't see anything advertising equanimity. Here is something that's not really interesting. Won't get you excited. You think, well, switch that off. Yeah. And so this is not just a diatribe against screens, because I use them myself. But, that sense of mindful awareness of where is my culture? What am I immersed in? And how much of that is just fantasy of various kinds, just nebulous virtual realities. And what does that do to you? And we notice certainly in that kind of culture the sort of abusiveness of the messaging and the violence of the messaging that can come across, or called the dark web, or even not just on these chats. People get very unpleasant to each other. They wouldn't do that if you're standing in the same room, I hope. But it cuts off responsibility. You don't know who said it, you don't know where it's going, it doesn't matter. Just spew your poison out. Totally responsibility. And say, no, if you live in a real culture and a community with full awareness, you try to bear in mind everything you do and say affects somebody. And internally you don't really know that. A lot of the time we're just thinking, oh, I'm doing this, I'll do this. You don't really contemplate. You get very internal and contemplating the external. How does this look, sound, seem? What's the effect of that? The way I use my body. The way the language I use. Even the volume and the speed. Is this something that leads towards other people feeling steadied, calm, clarified, or just agitated, confused? And so we really train like that, because then you're beginning to use this contemplate this world of sense contact, and recognizing in that where the ignorance and defilements creep in, and if they're extracted, that very same world of sense contact can have a very inspiring and gladdening quality to it. And certainly Luang Por Chah, someone who was very manifest. He wasn't just kind of like silence, he was very manifest. Talking, acting, moving around, engaging with people. A lot of it, this could be very stern, but this was major presence. And you couldn't. I don't know if you could really be with Luang Por Chah for more than a few minutes without recognizing this is something different here. This is where you get that this is not just the ordinary person. This is something agile, powerful, going to places, deep, penetrative. Your faith rises because you're And that's so powerful and precious because, we can have faith, we can read a teaching and have faith in a teaching, that's great. But seeing it lived out, and by a rather kind of ordinary looking person, he wasn't sort of glamorous, tanned, beautifully shaped, it was kind of lumpy, dumpy sort of shape. That was part of the beauty of it, and you see these movies of, was it Keanu Reeves as the Buddha, sort of godlike physique, and certainly Lumpur Cha didn't look like that. But so that was part of it. I think, well, it's like a potato, but real earth quality to it, and yet out of that something really very potent and powerful going on. Yeah. And so you think, oh, this is different. Yeah. The manifestation was powerful and many-faceted. So people often remark about how his manifestations would change quite significantly. When he'd be Wat Pa Pong, he tended to be much more on the kind of severe, straight, firm, But he was travelling in the West, he'd be much more engaging, witty, jokey, humorous, and but you think, what's happening? Well, my sense is the person actually is sensing the ground of what was the ground of that culture in the Isan, which actually responded to those signs in a very supportive way, which wouldn't have worked so well in the West. Westerners would actually need to be warmed and drawn out and engaged, because their culture is so withdrawn from that. But anyway, that's the way it was, and there's something about that ability to manifest and change in accordance with circumstance, and yet not changing principle. So, to say, Lumpur Cha, don't change, just adapt. You keep the principle, keep the basic themes, the parami, the Dhamma, and then you change the manifestation in accordance with what fits and creates the right effect in that culture. And he was kind of very confident in that. Certainly, he spent early part of his training pretty much alone, visiting various teachers. Lumpur Kinali was one of his teachers he stayed with quite a bit. And Lumpur Kinali, very, very quiet monk. Very quiet, very simple monk. Didn't say much at all. But also Lumpur Kinali, talk about modest. When I went to visit his, they have a little kind of like a, what do you call it, a reliquary, where they keep his requisites, what he left behind. The sum total of his physical requisites is kind of rag, a bowl, a rag he wore, leather sitting cloth. I think there was something like the sandals, his pair of flip-flops, which just like somebody took a slice of bubble gum. It was that thin, with a bit of string, and he walked to India and back with those. So renunciation, very silent, and Lumpur Cha stayed with him, and so someone who kind of had very little manifestation at all, and yet deep, deep embodied presence. So certainly Lumpur Cha lived with that, picked that up, and then, as he began to make his forge out on his own, feeling he'd be near his home village. And his mother living nearby, she came to the monastery, became a nun. And so there's something very kind of, again, very cultured and communal about that. He was living in a real place with real people and being a real person, but transformed by those deep practices. And that, to me, is very inspiring. Because often for the meditator, yeah, you're meditating fine. Go home, see what happens. Yeah. But for the cultivator, they begin to contemplate and use the world around them and their relationships and purify them. So they're very thorough. And it means also there's a great outreach. A lot of the forest teachers would be like Luang Por Kinali, very quiet, don't say much. And went to stay with them to be at a simple kuti, not much teaching, hardly any. Just a few do's and don'ts, and then keep going. Very often, not even group meetings. Mostly on your own, arms round, patimokkha, back on your own. But Luang Por Chah, kind of the very significant things he did was deliberately establish a lot of group practice and community forms, where people love to learn to relate to each other with respect, kindness, and cooperate. So using that relational realm as a place also to purify from who's top dog here and who's getting what, and you work through all that. Everybody help out. Position is relative. So 10 vassas, one day you're the senior monk, next day 3 monks of 15 vassas come in, you're the junior monk. And you just change the duties as accordance with where you are in that system, and you don't hang on to some position or another. So all these, any of these duties you carry out, junior, senior, anagarika, abbot, senior nun, it's not what the duty is, it's how you carry it out with purity, and how you carry it out without clinging and making identity out of it. That's what counts. Accessibility. One of these things, one of the more humorous accounts, there are quite a few, of Luang Por Chah. He was this young student who'd Oxford University graduate, and he'd done some retreats, meditation retreats, I think, with Mr. Goenka. I think it was Mr. Goenka. The practice is one you spend a lot of time moving your attention through your body scanning, moving it through the body till you're moving it down your arms, your fingers. So take an hour or so to move through your body. So it's kind of like you could do it pretty good, you got this thing. You could do his meditating. So Luang Por comes to see Luang Por Chah. He says to Luang Por Chah, "This is how I meditate." Luang Por Chah looked at him, and he was sitting like this, and he leaned forward, put his hands on the ground, until he was crouched and he started sniffing his body like a dog. Right. So he made like a dog, sniffing his arms. So that's what you're doing. So it was a humorous, it was a kind of a put down, or a balloon pricker. But also it's done with a kind of sense of actually physically embodying this and presenting it, because the person couldn't speak Thai anyway. And so that kind of he was prepared to, which is a pretty unusual thing for a monk to do, particularly someone of his seniority, and just presenting it, with that sense of, this is fun, isn't it? It's a joke. Don't take yourself seriously. Don't get so stuck up. Just relax, Let's be real. And he very much encouraged that. I think particularly with, maybe more with Westerners, I can't really speak with great authority on these matters, but the people who get a lot, I think that one of the characteristics was what he noticed about Westerners, their seemingly complicated thought patterns and processes, psychologies and attitudes, and complicated ones. And where maybe at that time the people at Wat Pah Pong were mostly Isan villagers, sort of fairly, simple psychologies, were much more sensual in the earth, dealing with, pain and craving, kind of raw stuff. Westerners just up in their heads, these complicated doubt systems, and should I be this, and what does this represent? What's the meaning of that? What's the ultimate truth? And should I do how much vipassana should I do? I should do samatha, or maybe I need to do more metta, which is really how many jhanas, which is this jhana or that jhana, this kind of stuff going on. Tying themselves in knots with a lot of self-criticism. Yeah. And he would encourage, no. So it's one occasion when I think they have part of the culture was you take it in turns. So there's a lot of attendance, a lot of foot massaging and being in saunas and people giving each other, tweaking and putting pressure points and helping each physically. There's a lot of physicality to it. And kind of there's, it's not erotic, but it's very much, we're here. And in a healing way. And one of the practices was to actually pour water over the teacher. So you kind of, they put a little bathing cloth and they pour water and they soap them down. This is something that was quite common. And, people feel, well, I don't know about that. But it would kind of be part of, the Thai monks would do it quite readily, so eventually people would join in, a foot massage, foot washing, and then body washing, and a sense of actual, contact, physical contact. And one of the American monks, he was bathing Luang Por Chah. Luang Por Chah said, did you ever do this to your father? And he said, well, no, we don't bathe our fathers in New York, Luang Por. He said, that's why you have so many problems. And I think, okay, chew that over. A sense of real, earthy family relationship rather than dad, some old geezer I'm getting away from, actually the physical and the care and the, that directness, earthy directness. And certainly if the time I spent with Luang Por Chah, which wasn't very much, I mean, it wasn't necessarily physical, but it was a psychological massage, because he'd be looking around and scanning the room, and he could sense who was kind of, and he was very good. He had good radar, and he'd do a number on somebody. not unpleasant, but sort of like teasing or what is happening for you, or bring them forward, or people are nervous. He'd kind of have a little joke with them and bring them forward. He was very I was very nervous, and so he was very warm and drawing me forward to engage with him, which I was very quite frightened and anxious, but he was very, pulling forward in that. And other people who seemed to be a bit more kind of, well, I got it all together, this is right, he'd sort of deliberately find ways to tease them, undercut them. So this kind of play, engaged play, the manifestations to work on our fear and our self-boundaries, we get so involved with just being me, and it's not even pleasant. A lot of it's bounded by self-consciousness and fear and a sense of self-image, and I'm not really this, and I'm not good enough, and maybe I should be something else. And they're just kind of like stuck in this membrane. And just that breaking of the membrane into, you're just another being, come on, wash the bhajan, pull the water out of the well, come out of it. Yeah. And then, you kind of feel it's all about action and flow, and then stop. And this is another very significant feature that one witnesses in many of these accomplished teachers. We call it, it's like an absence. Except it's not absent. It's present but non-manifesting. And again, if you spent time with Luang Por Chah, you probably would notice that. Times it's almost like the person disappeared. It's steady, quiet. And then able to come out again. And this again is very extremely significant. Spending time with Luang Por Liam, who was very closely associated with Luang Por Chah for many years, and eventually became the abbot. And when Luang Por Chah was alive and functioning, Luang Por Chah, there'd be the sala, Luang Por Chah would sit in the top at one end of it, and on one he'd be there, and he'd be doing what he was doing and saying what he was saying. And either side of him were these two absences. There's Luang Por Liam, and Luang Por Chu. And they didn't say, they didn't move. It was just because there was they were like the bookends around Luang Por Chah, just holding presence, just nothing. And Luang Por Liam barely spoke. Luang Por Chu was hardly, even less. What's this about? And they're just, they're certainly not dozing off or spacing out. Just manifestations happening. We don't need to add anything to that. Just be here. So in a way that the absence helps to frame and highlight the presence. You've got nothing particular to have to do or say. Don't do or say. Just be there. And being able to switch off or turn down, whereas an average person will probably go, okay, well, what's he going to talk about today? Yeah, well, I've heard that. Yeah, well, so. What are they doing down there? Oh, it reminds me, I'm going to be doing some projects this afternoon. So, what time is? I wonder how long this is going to go on for. Have I got time to do that? Yeah, what's she up to? Kind of doing all this stuff. Oh, it reminds me, I think all this stuff be going on. So when we're actually, that's the average person's presence is a series of absences. It's a sense of what could, should, might, wouldn't, what if, are all just virtual realities kind of spewing out. And we take that for life, and it's just this proliferation of restless energy. And when you're training, when you've got something like that, so you don't need to be anybody now, turn it off. And that also very important, because if everybody's out there clamouring and making noise and this, that and the other, then it's too much. It's too much, too much energy moving around. I don't know how to be silent when it's necessary, when it's not needed, and how to say something when it is needed. And if you contemplate in your own mind and process, you see right in the center of that, when we're receiving impressions, we're receiving words, we're receiving visions, we're receiving touches, something, contact, what happens? Perception? Oh, that means that. And then, touched by a sight, oh, that reminds me, what's he doing that for? You get the perception, and then this other thing, which is the activation, the mind starts chattering about it. That's called sankhara. So you get the perception, that's that, and then ding, and then, well, I don't agree with that, or I do agree with it, or yada yada. And that movement is so quick and so immediate, we don't even see their links. It's completely conjoined. To see something is to start talking about it in your head. And then all that and going on. And this is called rebirth, or birth. Now, if there's seeing, hearing, contact, impression, and that impression resonates and is allowed to resonate and not picked up, not acted upon, not criticized, but just allowed to, you get something non-birth, non-becoming. And these are actual moments that we can touch into if we are prepared to be held steadily, where fundamentally we're not just following the track of our reactions, of our agendas, of our histories, of our all that inherited stuff. We're not following those tracks of what I plan to do, what I expect, and what could happen, and what I think about this, and the way other people should be. We're not following those tracks. We're not following the tracks of, well, I'm not much of this, I ought to be something else. We're not following those tracks. We're just recognizing those tracks. Okay? Awareness. Don't engage, don't tangle, don't wrestle with it. Energy is not feeding that. Those tracks fade. And that requires resolution and patience and the commitment to be in a context that keeps you there at that place. And this is what I imagine many of us, certainly myself, I've found, I need restraint. I need something that challenges or my, want to do this, want to do that, don't want to be this, don't want to be that. Just challenges that. It's not, and not in an unfriendly way, but this is why we're patient and resolved and kindly. Just let it go, it's okay. And then you see other people doing it. And you see experienced people of 30, 40 reigns sitting there like there's just nobody there. They're not kind of, well, I am 30, 40 reigns, I should be there just. And you think, oh, light, open. Certainly now I certainly have the privilege of being with Lumpur Liam, a few months ago, and again it's such a kind of lovely example of someone who should be burdened. He's supposed to be the abbot of Wat Pah Pong, which has now got 300 branches in it, so there's 300 sources of stuff to deal with, and problems and issues and projects and developments and queries. He should be totally saturated and flooded and have iPhones clicking around him to organise himself. Doesn't. You know, this kind of insignificant little figure. Doesn't say very much. You know, sit down in the room, it's just empty room, sit there. Nothing to do, doesn't do anything. Yeah. And he's going to ask him a question. See, it's the same thing with Luang Por Chah. You'd ask a question, and the question would go, and there was no reaction to it. Right? It's just like it sort of disappeared. And then something would come out that wasn't necessarily about responding to the question. It was about responding to the person who asked the question. So, And I noticed that with Luang Por Liam. He'd sit there and say, Luang Por, would you like to do this or that? You think, well, okay, nothing happens. And then he looks around, get up, walk out. Okay, that's what he wanted to do. He didn't need to verbalise it. But, it wasn't like, oh, right. It was a sense he just paused and what's needed. That gap between perception, input, and reaction in there. And for some of us, that's like a second or a moment we can get to sometimes, or for longer periods. And you realise for these people, this is the abiding place. This is where they live. That's their home territory, in that open space of just. And the manifestation can come from that and dissolve. The manifestation occurs in accordance with what's necessary. It's not personally demanded. It's not just the overflowings of some personal wish. It's just that which is required, suitable in terms of Dhamma, and then, then end. And so with someone like Luang Por Liam, be there all day in his kuti, visit Wat Pa Pong, people coming in and out, just sitting there, just constantly. It's that, you just listen and, well, if we think like that, we're going to create problems for ourselves. Somebody comes incredibly complicated, this, that, and the other. Well, things will change, and just directing straight to the emotional reactivity and just guide it out. Don't need that. And that, using that ability to act as a centre, a human centre for how many thousands of people? How many thousands of people? Whereas the average person would be really, really busy, secretaries, computers, all this kind of stuff, to try to manage it, and frying with trying to get it all managed, and someone's just doing exactly the opposite. Letting the emptiness and deal with that, and then you know what to do. Because that empty place is the place that most of us are skipping over in our hurry to get things figured out. In our expectations of the future, we're skipping over it. And so therefore we're making huge complexities, and we're not we're losing the power of steadiness. And it just goes on and on and on. So the wise one is one who encourages you to go back to your polarity of steadiness, the ability to let go, empty, really discern the emotional triggering and remove that. And then you'll know what to do. That was how Rinpoche generated these monasteries. He didn't have a whole kind of skill secretariat, just, you do this, go there, do this, you'll know what to do. And keep in touch. We've got to work it together. Individual responsibility, community awareness. And one of the kind of favourite references that Paul Liam makes when you're asking something, he says, future. That means uncertain. You only hear that one word, future, and you realise this means it's not of the present. It's uncertain. Don't hang on to it. So no future. It says practice for no result. No result, no future, no success, no failure. Give all that up. Don't get caught in those waves. Stay in the equanimity. And yet with that, no future, no success, no creation. You've got thousands of people, monasteries being built, created, stuff being created from that place of just empty your own agendas, respond to what's around you, don't concern yourself about the future, act responsibly now, in purity. Everything will take care of itself from there. We do this externally and internally. Practice that in your own heart and mind. Don't try to create an idea of what you should be, could be, will be, won't be, because you're only this and that and the other, and you might be this, you're never that, and are you this? Don't do that. Just come to that place where you understand these triggerings of anxiety and need and worry and fear, and you pull out the trigger. And then you'll know what to do. And you won't need to have a definition of what you are. This is the emptiness and the manifestations that we inherit as our ongoing culture and tradition. And it's time for us to express our gratitude in more than words, but in practicing in accordance with that.